Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I am using the Bees and Bonnets stamps, dies, and stencils. And then I'm also going to be using some rectangle dies and I think it's Blessings of Spring is what I end up using for the sentiment. So these are super cute little like bees, butterflies, a couple different kinds of flowers, and I think the intention was for them to kind of create their own little garden. And I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it a little bit differently. And so I decided that I was going to create like a little garden frame with all of these little birds and butterflies and bees kind of flying about. There's in the flowers even, there's like kind of little bee tushies drawn in where they're like in the flower. There's a little ladybug. It's really cute. So I am using the Be Creative Intense Black ink to stamp my images. I am stamping, I think all the images in the set except for the sentiments. And I'm actually going to stamp them twice. That's why I'm using a half sheet of cardstock. I saw somewhere, who was having the conversation? I saw it somewhere. Somebody was having the conversation about paper. And while I always link my supplies, I do just want to know, I choose to color on Nina 80-pound solar white cardstock. And that's just because I typically tend to use more alcohol inks, whether it is Copics or Olos or whatever brand you happen to be using. They blend in the fibers of the paper, and so I do feel like I have an easier time blending on this cardstock. That doesn't mean that you can't color in other things, and there's some people who really like the Express It Copic coloring cardstock. It's like specified for it, but that's a little bit pricier. So I guess it just depends on kind of where you're at and where you want to make the investment. I learned I learned to Copic color on Walmart cardstock. So switching to the Nina was quite an upgrade for me, which was several years ago. And I've just stuck with it. So I've stamped all of them out on this sheet, and now I'm going to go in with the stencils. So in the stencil set, there are 5 different stencils. If you've never used Honeybee's stencils before, they're great because they're clear so you can completely see through them. But then each of the images is on every stencil. Even if you're not using a layer for that image, it will just be etched in there and nothing will be cut out. So that way they're kind of always in the same spot and it's very easy to line them up. So I just started with the first stencil, which is a lot of the kind of the leaves, and I picked 2 different color greens. I picked one that was more on the yellow-green side with mowed lawn and rustic wilderness, and then I picked lucky clover and pine needles, just to kind of mix it up. You certainly don't have to do this. You could do it all in the same green. These brushes that I'm using, stencils are becoming more and more popular. Now, I am, in addition to my stenciling, I am going to be adding some Copic shading to my ink blending. But you absolutely could do all of your shading with the ink blending and get really, really great results. Since stenciling has become more popular, the smaller brushes are really kind of handy to have because then you don't have to worry about like masking off all the open areas that are on the stencil that are meant for other items, because you're using smaller stencils. So Honeybee recently came out with a size 10, a size 7, and a size 5. I will be using all 3 for today's stenciling. The 10 is the biggest, and I tend to use my 10 for colors that I know I'm going to use a lot of. And I don't mean a lot of in this particular card, I mean a lot of in general. So like mowed lawn is one of my go-to colors. I have no issue using a 10 for that. But there are other colors that maybe I don't use as often. For example, dried marigold. We're going to use that for some of our oranges. So that one I am probably going to lean more towards using a smaller size. But that's just the way I do it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. The 7 is kind of like the middle of the road No, the 5 is the middle of the road, and then the 7 is the smallest. And I use a lot of combinations of those two for the additional shading. So like when you see me putting down the first color, in this case it's Lucky Clover, I'm putting that all over the stencil, and then I'm going in and I'm shading it with a little bit of pine needles, and I tend to use my smallest sizes for that. So for the leaves, I did 2 Mowed Lawn, 2 Lucky Clover. And then here I'm going in, this is the Hickory Smoke. You could use Black Soot for this, but I was just trying to get a feel for how dark things were going to be. And obviously, you know, you can always build up the color. We're always doing that in, you know, our card making when we're trying to achieve dimension. We're building up the color no matter what medium we're using. So I decided to go with the lightest color, just a light application of that Hickory Smoke, but you absolutely could do it darker, or like I said, you could swap out the Black Soot. Then for the bees, I'm doing just one color, just the mustard seed. And there's so many cute, like, there's so many cute little bees. Like there's one in the poppy, a little bee tushy. There's 2 in the daffodils. One's a little tushy and one's a little bee who's kind of like snugged up inside the inside of the daffodil. And then there is one that's kind of like climbing in the little, I think they're bluebells. Very, very cute. Love them. And then in addition to that, you know, they have the extra bee that you can stamp. So I'm just going to go through here and I wanted to show you at least one of each color combination. So for, I'm not sure what this is. I'm not sure if it's hyacinth. Not positive, but I went with purple. And for that, I'm using Wilted Violet and then a little bit of Dusty Concord. The reason that I'm only using 2 colors is because, and the reason I'm only doing it one time, you know, each color one time, is because I know I'm going to go back in with my markers. If you are a person who is not comfortable with markers, or maybe you don't have the dexterity to do it, like I said before, you can add all of your shading with your inks and get really good dimension. You just have to take the time to layer the colors. I would rather use my markers, but the same look is totally achievable by just using either multiple ink colors or multiple intensities of the same ink color. So for my bluebells, I went with Salty Ocean and I shaded it with Faded Jeans. And then I'm trying to think the daffodils will be Mustard Seed and Fossilized Amber. And then I think that's all. The orange I only brought in for the butterflies, which was, what was that? Dried Marigold and Spiced Marmalade. Because I lost my carved pumpkin. Like, we know as crafters, like there are sometimes where you are just using something and you set it down and then your desk eats it and you can't find where it went. And then we spend, 5, 10, upwards of 20 minutes sometimes in my case, trying to find the thing that we just had in our hand. But I legitimately do not know where my carved pumpkin distress ink went. And it was like my go-to orange. I really loved it because I love bright colors. And I couldn't find it. So after searching, I'm not kidding, for like months, I just went ahead and bought one the other day. And I picked up some other things from Honeybee as well. That's where I tend to do a lot of my shopping because they do carry such a large variety of things. So I picked up a new carved pumpkin, and then I picked up some of the other colors that were released later that I didn't have. Like Lost Shadow and Lumberjack Plaid and those ones. The ones that I really fell in love with, like Uncharted Mariner, I bought right away. Same thing with like Salvage Patina and Saltwater Taffy, like I bought those. And I typically do try to pick up the ink and the oxide since I do use both. I do use the inks more though, just because they're brighter. And as stated maybe 30 seconds ago, I love bright colors. So we're just going to go through, we're going to do the rest of the inking. Now, if you are a person who has the, what are they? They're like the bundles, the blending brush bundles Honeybee has. They do have a smaller size in there. It is not as small as these more detail blending brushes, but for large areas, those are great. I could have used it for the daffodils. I didn't, but I did use it. I will use that smallest size of the blending brushes for the poppies, because there's 4 large and that one little bud, so it just seemed to make good sense to use the larger size. So, yeah, we did a video yesterday and we had just like an impromptu story time. We are coming up on Mother's Day. And so the reason that I was going to use the sentiment that came in this set. Really, really like it. I think it's super cute. It says, "You are the sunbeam that's always manages to break through the clouds." Like, how just nice and encouraging. But actually, I am trying to make a lot of Mother's Day cards, or ones that could be perceived as Mother's Day. So I changed the sentiment to "May your day bloom with happiness," so that it could be used for Mother's Day if I just stamp that on the inside. Because there was a lady who lives in my hometown, and she had I can't remember if I think her child was premature. But anywho, they're still in the hospital. And I believe they're in the NICU, and they've been for like a month or two. But anyway, very kind-hearted woman. And she said that, when she's in there, there's all these moms, and she wanted to put together like a little care package for each of the moms. I think she said there's around 20. She wanted to put together a little care package for them for Mother's Day, since, they are spending the majority of their days, most assuredly Mother's Day, in the NICU with their babies. And so she was asking, if anybody wanted to make any donations for her to pick up, like, warm socks and blankies, because it gets cold in there. And this is obviously very close to my heart, because if you have followed me, you know that my goddaughter was born at 30 weeks. And so my best friend spent quite a bit of time in the NICU until my goddaughter could come home on monitors and oxygen and all this. There's so many things that they had to do to be able to bring her home safely. And now she is, thank God, a thriving little, 10 years old. She's the same. Why can't I remember that? She's the same age as my child, and yet I could not remember it. Anywho, she's 10. But anyway, so she was looking for donations, which I was totally happy to make. But I also asked her if maybe she would like some Mother's Day cards to put into the bag. And I'm not typically a person who gives my cards away or mails them, not because I'm stingy with my cards, but because I'm terrible at mailing things. So I don't often offer something like that, but I felt like, that would be a nice little way for her to be able to sign her name and to be able to give them Mother's Day cards with their little gift bags. So most of my cards that you're going to be seeing coming up, because I have to have them to her by the 9th, so I only have like a week time span, will be something that could possibly be used for Mother's Day. Please know you could always swap out the sentiments. So now let's go back to the card. So here we are going in and adding the details with Copic markers. Now, I am not covering up all of the stenciling. I'm using the stenciling as my lightest color. So I'm really just picking kind of my 2 darker colors and going in and adding a little bit of shadows. I start with my darkest color. If you're not comfortable with that, you could always start with your kind of mid-tone, then add your darkest color, and then blend it back out with your mid-tone. Or you can skip this part altogether. Like, you can see that the stenciling is very nice. You could also be a bit more heavy-handed if you wanted it to be a bit brighter. But again, I am a colorist. I am most comfortable with my markers. And so this is just the path of least resistance for this girl. So that is what I chose to do. So pretty much just 2 colors for most of them. The exception to that is going to be the yellows, because the yellows and the reds, honestly, I think are the ones I used. No, maybe I used 3 colors for the blue too. Huh. I told you I was going to use 2 colors, and then I think I've made myself a non-truth teller. But anyway, those colors, the ones that are a bit harder to get good shadows for, especially the yellows, that Y08 is super bright, but it's not going to add a ton of shadows. I did just use the Y08 for my bees, but for the florals, they needed a bit more dimension. The only bee that is the exception is the one that is kind of all the way up into this flower. I did use the darkest yellow. Well, yeah, it's actually an orange. It's a YR24, because it needed it. It needed a little bit of that. So, yeah, again, this is not something that you have to go in. The stenciling itself is beautiful and would make a very pretty card. It would just be a little bit softer. And maybe, hey, maybe that's the look you're going for. Like, it's spring, pastels are very springtime. So if you use the same colors that I used, you would get more of a pastel look for the ink blending. You could also get a much brighter look by using, deeper, brighter colors. So like for the red, I used saltwater taffy and abandoned coral. If you wanted something that was more bold, you could use a candied apple and an aged mahogany. That would be much brighter, and then you would have the contrast from the darker color. So, I try very hard to make sure that I reiterate that it doesn't have to be like mine. It doesn't have to be what I'm doing in order for you to get pretty results. So for the blues, the reason I use 3 colors is because I wanted it to be more on a true blue side versus a like bright, what is that color? I don't even know what I would call that. It's not a Tiffany blue because it's not on the green side. It's just like a bright light blue. But I wanted them to be more on the blue side. So that's why I chose the B20s family. But my ink blending, because of the salty ocean, was a little bit lighter. So I used that I think it was a 00, to just blend that in to the stenciling. These little flowers, you could color them as either Black-Eyed Susans. I chose to color them as Cosmos with a yellow center and a pink petal, just because I was trying to incorporate another color, like more, you guys know I love the rainbow. So I was trying to incorporate a little bit of pink in there. And then I also did the orange with the butterflies. For the daffodils come in all kinds of different combinations, like yellow petals and orange centers, white petals with yellow centers. Like there's a lot of different combinations that you can kind of play around with. I wanted something else in the card to be orange, so I chose to color the centers of the daffodil, those as well. And I just went right over the yellow. Their Copics are transparent. All alcohol markers are transparent, so you can layer the colors. And especially since the orange is darker than the yellow, nobody's ever going to know. The only time that I covered up all of the stenciling was on the black parts of the bees, because I really needed them to be black. So in that case, I did add the black. I used a C7 and then a C5 for my highlight. I apologize that I did not tell you the colors or I did not show you the colors that I used for the poppy. I'm not sure what I was doing and how I got sidetracked. But anyway, it's an R29, an R35, and an R32. And these are just going to make them look more like of a true red, versus how kind of pale they are with just the distress inking. So yeah, I think she has a wonderful idea with wanting to, do the little care giveaway bags. I think that's wonderful, especially since, she's there herself, knowing firsthand kind of what they're going through. And even though she's in the thick of it, like she's still thinking about other people, which is super kind. So I figure I could I should be able to at least match her generosity by donating some cards to give to these mamas who will be spending their days in the NICU. For the poppies, red poppies typically have like a darker center, almost like a purple or a black. So I just reused the purples that we colored. I'm calling it hyacinth because I'm not sure if it's that or something else. But I just reused the purples for those to color in those centers. And then that is going to be the coloring of all of the images. I'm going to color the rest of them off camera. And then we're going to get into the die cutting. The reason that I am cutting out the frame is because I knew I wanted to pop up all of my images. But you guys also know that I despise chasing die cuts around. So I chose to cut out a frame that was slightly smaller than my A2 size card so that I could adhere my die cut pieces to the frame. Then it would become one framed piece, and when I went to go pop it up, I could do them all together. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut all of these out. Now I did lay out my frame off camera, and I am going to be using the press and seal hinge method to adhere this. So all that means is I'm going to put my press and seal down over my project, press it really well. It's going to stick to my glass mat. In order to further ensure it's not going to move, I am going to use my bone folder to kind of burnish it to my desk, and then it will act as a hinge or a door for me to lift up my die cuts to add my adhesive and then put them back down without anything moving. Now, real talk. When I was going through and adhering or arranging my frame, I did not tape down my paper. And then the OCD side of me straightened out my paper. So then when I went to go check it to make sure everything was still lined up, it was not, because my paper was crooked when I picked it up and it was not crooked when I placed it back down. So I did have a little bit of touch and go here where I kept checking to make sure that everything was where I wanted it to be, and then I finally got it. So I am going to add adhesive only to the frame part, only to the frame. And then that way I can flip this back over and adhere the majority of my pieces to the frame. There are some pieces like the little the little what are they? Cone flowers. I said cosmos before too, I think, the little cone flowers, where those are kind of tucked underneath, but they don't reach the frame. So I will have to go in and glue those. Same thing with like the butterflies or the birds that sit on top. I'm going to have to go in and glue those as well. Let's talk a little bit about the arrangement while we're doing this. I chose, and you can do it any which way that you want. However works for you to create your frame. You also don't have to use, like I used a set that had all different flowers, so it looks like, it's a bustling kind of garden with lots of stuff going on. But you don't have to do that. If you have a floral set that you love that's all the same types of flowers, you could create the frame with the same type of flower, and it would still be really very pretty. And it would still look like a little garden because, how many people do you know that plant, 3, 4, 5 of the same plant or the same species of plant or the same plant in different colors? Like you certainly could, stretch this into other sets that were the same and not all different. But I chose to do them so that everything was opposite each other, and that way I knew that there was going to create balance. So when I put the purple hyacinth in the bottom left hand corner, I put the other one in the top right hand corner. When I put the little bluebells above the hyacinth on the other side, I put them below. Then the daffodils go in the corners and the poppies fill out the center. This is a very easy way. This mirroring of each other is a very easy way to ensure that you have balance. But you can mess around and do different things. So even though I did all of my pieces with more of a mirror, the cosmos, I just stuck where I liked them. Same thing with the butterflies and the birds. I didn't, and my little bee. Like I just put them where I thought that they looked nice. Now here, which is another way that you can use the hinge method, is not just with liquid adhesive or with like a roll-on adhesive. You can also use them if you're intending to pop things up. Now, I knew that I was going to pop up my frame on foam tape. That's why I went through the trouble of adhering it to the frame to begin with, because I wanted to be able to do it as one piece. So that's why the pieces that don't touch, I just went ahead and added foam tape to. That piece of tape that was holding my frame to my cardstock, I went ahead and just ripped off what I could, and the rest I just folded over onto the back. I used the Honeybee large circle foam. I did use a lot of them. Some of them I cut in half if I needed to, but that way I know everything's going to be even and it's going to be popped up. And since these are going to be hand delivered, I don't have to worry about that. Plus, these particular ones are pretty low profile, honestly. I am going to add some liquid adhesive to those foam circles to make sure that I have a little bit of wiggle room when I go to set it down, to make sure that everything is lined up, and if I make a mistake, I can pick it up. You'll also notice that my frame is hanging over the edge of my card. That's totally fine. It actually ends up being really minimal trimming that we have to trim all four sides, but we only lose just a little bit from each one. And then here, I went back in and kind of checked just by pressing it to make sure everything was even. And I found two little areas. One was this little bud from the poppy, and one was the bottom coneflower. I think I called them cosmos again. What's wrong with me? You guys know what the pink flowers. That's what we're calling them from now on, the pink flowers. I had to pop that one up as well. And then I am going to use my scissors. Now, since I am going to be cutting through portions of the foam, I do like these Spellbinders detail scissors because they are non-stick, which means I can cut through the foam without it sticking to my scissors and creating a issue for me. There are other scissors I have tried and ones I've used for years that when I would cut through the foam tape, it would stick to the metal and then it would be stuck there as I was continuing to try to cut. So here I did miss coloring in the little dots on the ladybug black, so I went back and got those. And now here is the sentiment. I do believe it is Blessings of Spring. And so I'm just going to stamp this in black on white. You guys know that I don't love a white outline, but in this case, because my card base is white, I don't mind it. It blends in to the background, and so I thought it made sense to just do the black on white for the sentiment. I cut that out with its coordinating die, and then my intention was to put it into the center. However, I had kind of crowded up my center with a lot of little, bees and birds and butterflies. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up pulling up this little bee. He's already adhered with foam tape, so even if he pulled my paper a little bit, it's not a big deal because I'm going to cover it up with the sentiment. And for the sentiment, I used the same foam circles that I had previously used, so everything stays the same height. Adding my little bit of liquid glue for that wiggle room that I always need, and then I will go ahead and put this right into the center area, and then I'll be able to put my bee down just a little bit closer to the poppy. I just scooted him down just a little bit. For you guys know that I love the shimmer, the shine, the detail work. That's just how I roll. So I did add some clear shimmer to some of the flowers. I also added some white highlights to like the stamen, to the bees' wings, to the butterflies, to the birds, to some of the flowers. That's just little detail things that I enjoy doing. And then the last thing that I did to kind of finish off the card and fill in that open space was I got out my gem stickers. This one is from Hugs. It's called Hugs and Kisses. And there's like a really nice opalescent kind of white it's like a opalescent clear, I guess is what you would call it, in this set. And so I used that to frame my sentiment, and then that was it. The card was done. So I hope this helps you guys to look at maybe your garden stamps a little bit differently, to try to get more out of the stamps that you have to create different looks. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.